Welcome to Waterford Property Watch. My name is Darragh O'Connor and I'm joined by Derry O'Sullivan, who is a chartered engineer who currently operates as a BER assessor. First of all, Derry, what is a BER?
Thanks, Darragh, for having me. Yeah, a BER, it's an energy label for a building, like your washing machine or dishwasher might have an energy label. So it kind of indicates the energy performance of your building, and also the CO2 emissions that the building would, if you like, produce.
Yeah, and it stands for Building Energy.
It stands for Building Energy Rating. Yeah, it was introduced about 15 years ago on foot of a European directive. So the Irish government introduced it about 15 years ago. So it's up and running for that period of time, and it's now kind of bread and butter stuff for sales of houses and rents of houses and rental of houses and so on.
Why do people need a BER?
It's a legal requirement. As I said, if you are selling your property or if you are renting your property, then you need a BER certificate. And equally, SEAI have quite a range of grants available. And to avail of those grants, you will need sometimes a pre and then ultimately a post BER to show that what you've done to the house has made an improvement in your energy performance and therefore grant eligible.
Yeah, so let's talk about that because I think a lot of people are interested about that. What type of SEAI grants are available to people buying houses?
Okay, I haven't got a list here, but there's a whole range of grants available, starting from things like attic insulation. If you're if you're improving the insulation in your walls, for example, cavity wall insulation, there's a grant for that. There's a grant for external wall insulation, internal wall installation. There's a grant for heat pumps.
Yeah,
quite a significant grant for heat pumps, €6,500, and there are grants for solar panels as well.
And then you have vacant home grants and things like that as well.
That's a different level of derelict homes and so on.
Yeah.
And then also, if a homeowner was to go the one-stop shop route, in other words, dealing with a nominated one-stop shop energy or a upgrade provider, there are additional grants available. For example, there's an extra €5,000 for changing your windows and your doors. And so there's some benefits in going that route as well.
Right. Okay, so on the topic of BERs again then, are there different types of BERs?
There are, Darragh. There is the standard one, which is domestic BER. And I have a copy here for you, which happens to be an A1.
What you're looking for?
Which is what you're looking for. So, a typical BER certificate, it goes from a G, which is pretty much an inefficient home from an energy point of view, up to an A1. Equally, it goes from greater than 120 kilograms of CO2 per square meter per year, up to 0, which would be absolutely ideal. So, that's the standard domestic BER. If a house is going to be built, a provisional BER is required. Now, the standard one for that I mentioned a few minutes ago, that's valid for 10 years. A provisional BER is valid for 24 months, 2 years. Okay. After which, then you have to convert an actual survey has to be done on the finished house, and a standard BER is produced. For commercial buildings, there's a separate BER required.
Right.
It's a commercial BER.
Okay.
So effectively, there's 3 types.
Very good. And just not to scare anybody, what would an average grade of a home be in terms of ranging from G to A1 as we've seen? What's an average home in Ireland? We'll say.
Good question. I suppose, okay, let's say the average house, it ranged from over 100 years, around Waterford City, for example, up to the new ones that are being built. So I suppose the average house would be in or around 25, 30 years old.
Right.
Average.
Yeah.
And that would be a D1 verging on a D1, D2, verging on maybe a C2 or something like that. That would be the average.
Right. Okay. And when someone gets a BER assessor like yourself, they get a BER cert, but they also get an advisory report. They do. Can you talk about what an advisory report is?
I can. And again, I can just very quickly show you it's a nice, colourful, generally speaking, a 4-page report. And it's what the assessor fills out online prior to the publication of the BER. And it indicates the current situation of a dwelling, and indicates what could be done and what the effects of what could be done would have on the dwelling.
So it might just show some improvements,
and it would indicate the potential of a house. For example, if a house was a D2, for example, the assessor might say the following items are recommended, and if they were implemented, you could end up with, say, a B1, for example.
Yeah. And then you yourself, you go an extra mile then to do almost like a bespoke kind of advice for a buyer. Is that right?
I do, Darragh. Yeah. I mean, the BER certificate and the advisory report is limited.
Yeah.
It's excellent, of course, but it's limited. But I provide a specialised energy advice service to homeowners and give them a separate report showing all of the incremental improvements in energy consumption, if you like, that would result from any upgrades that they may implement.
Right, which is great for someone like, let's say, a first-time homeowner who doesn't know much about insulation, doesn't know much about windows. You can kind of help them.
Well, yeah, and I'm independent. I'm not selling anything other than advice.
Yeah.
So a lot of people do value independent advice. I'm not saying I'm the only person that does it, of course not, but a lot of people, homeowners, do value independent advice. And let's face it, the home is the most valuable item, generally speaking, for the average Joe Soap type of thing. So it's good to get independent advice.
Yeah. So peel back the curtain for me. What is it that you do when you're assessing a BER? Yeah. And how long does it typically take?
Yeah, okay. Also a good question. It takes me anyway, a standard house like a 3-bedroom semi or whatever, a standard house, that's what I would call a standard house, would take me 2 hours. Now, anybody that says they can do it in less than 2 hours or, do it in 45 minutes, words as far as I'm concerned. To do it properly, it takes 2 hours. And if it's a larger house, a very large house with 5 or 6 bedrooms and whatever, that will take proportionately longer. Okay, the procedure is I would go in, I would start off by taking, sketching the floor area, ground floor, basement if there is one, first floor, and second floors if there is one. Sketch the whole floor area, measure everything in the house, measure the walls, measure the ceiling heights, measure the windows, measure the doors, and so on and so on. So take photographic evidence of what I find. I would look at the heating system, look at the hot water system, look at the ESB meter, etc. Check the walls and whatever, and use all of that information to come up with the BER. Now, if, for example, new windows were recently installed in a house, I would be asking the homeowner to produce U-value certificates, such that instead of using default U-value numbers, which I would use in the DEEP software, I would use actual certified U-value figures, which would help to improve the real certificates will be better than default figures. So I would try to get certificates from the homeowners where possible. Right.
So that leads me to my next question. So would you say if anyone ever gets works done on their house, they really should be keeping the documentation for if they ever get their BER
100%
assessed?
100%, yeah. You should have a house file keeping all that information, yeah.
Because am I right in saying you can't take that into consideration in your BER set if you don't have proof? Am I right in saying that?
No, and I must have the documentation. Mustn't be just a printout from something online. It has to be site specific with the address of the property, etc. Yeah. So when a homeowner is, as I said a few minutes ago, is purchasing new windows or new doors for the house, they should first say to any provider, supplier, what is my U value? What is it going to, what is it, and will you give me certificates to support those numbers?
Maybe even scan it to have it on your computer, and just in case you lose the paper. Yeah. I suppose for the new first time.
Can I just say, by the way, speaking of windows, a lot of people say, well, double glazed, triple glazed, what should they do? Over the last number of years, triple glazed windows have, the difference in price between triple glazed windows and double glazed windows has reduced.
Right.
So I tend to advise now people to certainly get a quote for triple glazed windows as well as double glazed, and they will probably find that price difference is not hugely significant, but the U value improvement is significant. Like typically, good quality double glazed windows would have a U value of 1.2, whereas good quality triple glazed windows would have a U value of 0.8. So that's quite a significant improvement.
Yeah, could be worth doing. Yeah,
absolutely.
And I suppose that leads as well, as a first-time buyer in the last 2 years myself, for those who are watching, I know there's no quick fix to improving your BER, but what's a cost-effective method that can help you bring up your bills, your BER, and the warmth in your home, we'll say?
Yeah. Well, as I kind of indicated a few minutes ago, when the assessment is really looking at the fabric of the house, the ventilation issues in the house, and the heating structure or heating setup in your house. So, yeah, I suppose the biggest bang for your buck is up in the attic, because heat rises, and if you have poor insulation in your attic, you're going to lose heat very easily and very quickly. So the cheapest thing you can do is increase the attic insulation, your attic insulation, up to something like 300 millimeters of mineral wool. That's the best bang for your buck. Following that, then, if you do that, if you have that implemented, then you should be looking at cavity wall insulation, which is cheaper than internal wall insulation and cheaper than external wall insulation. Both of them are excellent, but they can be disruptive in terms of accessing fittings and sockets and all that sort of stuff and whatever. Plus the fact that it makes a mess of your house when it's being done, because it's quite disruptive. Whereas cavity wall insulation is done from the outside and it's not disruptive. It's not as good as internal or external wall insulation, but it's nearly as good and it's recommended.
Okay. So that could be good for people who are listening, who are on the fence about selling their home and are considering improving their BER.
Yep.
Do you think that increases the value of their home if they have a better BER?
I do, Darragh, and you know yourself, when you're selling houses, people are now more and more aware of BERs. Some people are scared by it. They're not quite sure exactly what it all means, but more and more people are talking about BER. And it's been in now for about 15 years, so it's kind of gained a bit of notoriety, if you like. So the answer to your question is very simply, if you have a good BER rating, does it increase the value of your house? Yes, it does, because energy is expensive, and people are conscious of the running costs of a house.
Yeah, and consumers are a lot more aware these days. Would you have noticed that as well?
100%, yeah. Click online. People are online all the time, and homeowners are more educated on these issues.
Yeah, and obviously it's even brought more to the forefront when some banks are offering green mortgages when a BER is in the B rating and plus. So it's a great incentive. Yeah,
some lending institutions, for example, now if you upgrade your house and you can get up to a B3, that will give you a lower mortgage rate. Other lending institutions will say if you improve your rating from, say, one letter to the next letter, in other words, from a D2 up to a C, they will reduce your interest rate. But like everything else, you would need to check with your own individual mortgage provider to see what's on offer.
Yeah, so it's a no-brainer, because you're saving on your bills and potentially saving on your
running costs.
Yeah. And then in terms of exemptions, is there any buildings that are exempt from requiring a BER?
There are, let me see now. First one would be national monuments, protected structures, some agricultural buildings, standalone buildings that are less than 50 square meters.
Right. Okay.
Would be exempt.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. And I suppose we were talking about momentarily about reducing your bills with BER. How will a homeowner see their bills reduced with a better BER?
Well, if you look at the numbers on the certificate, their primary energy usages. But if, for example, your home is 260 or greater, which would be a D2, and you get up to, say, a B1, which would be, say, just greater than 75, say 80, you're kind of looking at a significant reduction in energy usage, in the order of 100, 200% type of thing. So, I mean, if you transform that, and if you're spending, say, €2,500, €3,000 on energy costs, electricity and fuel, oil or gas, whatever, per year, and you move from the D that I talked about up to, say, a B, you can look at halving your annual energy costs.
And that's what people want to hear.
That's what people want to hear. And that's what the Irish government want to hear, and what the EU want to hear, that we're becoming more and more efficient.
Yeah. And if someone wanted to take the next step, solar panels, should everybody get a solar panel or no?
Yeah, also a very good question. In terms of renewables, the standard kind of heating in this country is you have solid fuel, of course. But in more modern houses, you have oil or gas. Another thing that you can do, by the way, which I should mention, is that if you have an old boiler, generally speaking, old boilers are non-condensing boilers, so they'll be low efficiency. So one thing that you can do to improve your BER rating is to upgrade your boiler to a condensing boiler and put in boiler controls, and that can have a significant impact on the BER rating of your home. Alternatively, you could replace your boiler with a heat pump.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people ask me about heat pumps. Are they suitable for every house? And and the answer is no, they're not suitable for every house. They're only suitable for houses where the HLI is certainly below 2.3, but ideally below 2. And my personal viewpoint would be that I would not recommend a heat pump when the HLI, which is a kind of an internal number within the assessment process.
Right.
If your HLI is below 2, then your house would be defined as being heat pump ready. So it's a candidate for a heat pump. But to answer your question about solar panels, sun is shining now today, so it's great.
For a change, yeah.
For a change. So solar panels used to be very expensive. They're less so now, and also they're more productive. I mean, the solar panels now, a standard panel can produce 455 watts. The sun is blasting away. So that's fantastic in comparison to what the productivity of panels, say, 10 or 15 years ago. So plus the fact that they're much cheaper now, than so many years ago. So the answer is, if your house, the roof of your house is, appropriately orientated to the sun. In other words, if you've got a good aspect and got a good roof surface, excuse me, it makes perfect sense to go solar panels.
Okay, very good. And on heat pumps, what you were speaking about there, you're saying if a house is suitable or not. If a house is suitable, how much would you recommend someone, if price wasn't a barrier on getting a heat pump?
To be honest, well, I would. I've one myself.
Okay.
I've one myself, and I've got solar panels myself. So
okay.
I'm not just talking about this. I believe in it.
Yeah.
Okay? So I think they're a good solution. Heat pumps are expensive items, but the grant is fantastic. It's €6,500. So a typical, and again, I'm just throwing a number out there, which is around about correct. A typical heat pump installed in your house would cost in the order of 13 grand.
Okay. Additional
costs may apply if you require larger radiators or something like that. Because the reason why I mention that is that a heat pump, generally speaking, supplies space heating hot water at a lower temperature than a gas boiler or an oil boiler.
Okay.
So you may need larger radiators to give you the same thermal output. But that aside, the grant is $6,500. So it's a real option for houses that are suitable.
And we sell new homes here at Liberty Blue. For those who have bought a new home and they have a heat pump, how often would you recommend they get it serviced?
There's not that much that can go wrong with a heat pump.
Right.
Basically, there's a compressor and a fan and so on, and you have your thermostat controls. But look, once a year you certainly once every 2 years.
Yeah.
Once a year, and it's a cursory call by the supplier. They just go around, check things. So it's not an expensive maintenance item.
Okay, and on heating as well, for those who maybe have had an open fire or a Stanley stove, will say, what are your thoughts on the pellet stoves that are coming in now?
Yeah, I've seen quite a few installed. I haven't got one myself. I have a stove, all right. And speaking of stoves, another little, if you like, a piece of advice for people is if you have chimneys are very inefficient. They're 30% efficient, which means they're 70% inefficient. But also, a lot of your hot air in a house, even if you haven't got your chimney on, lighting and so on, a lot of the hot air has gone up the spout, and it's just So chimneys are very inefficient items in a house, and I strongly recommend people either to block them up or put a stove in instead.
And would that affect their BER if they blocked it up?
Yep, it reduces the ventilation, heat losses, etc. from your house. But the stove is a realistic option as well. Irish people love a fire in winter and so on. Fire, even though it's not producing all of the heat for the house, it's just a nice kind of feature to have in a house. I think so, because I have one myself. So yeah, of course you can block up a chimney, but a stove is a real option.
Yeah, and for people who are tech-minded, watching the likes of Hive and other technologies like this, would that have an impact on BERs at all, or is that considered when?
Sorry, which?
Technological systems for heating. So where you can press a button to turn on your hot water.
Oh yeah, I mean,
is that considered when you're doing an assessment?
No, it's just a control.
Right.
It's just a control. But I mean, if it means that you have a thermostat, say, downstairs and a separate thermostat upstairs, and you have a separate thermostat on your domestic hot water, then that will be reflected in your BER assessment, and it will improve your rating. But the app itself is just a control, but they're great,
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
So you can use an app to control a boiler, any kind of a boiler at the moment, if it's so designed. You can use an app to control your heat pump. You can use an app to check on how your solar panels are performing and so on. For example, I left this morning and I was generating 5 kilowatts of power.
I checked that this morning, yeah.
Yeah.
And then on solar panels, just one last thing, because I know a lot of people, we get this asked quite a bit with solar panels. I know typically you can't say, but how long do you think before people see a return in profit on solar panels, are you thinking?
Very good question. Again, yeah. And I kind of intimated the cost of panels 10, 15 years ago were very high, and they weren't quite so efficient then. The reverse is true now. The cost has come down. They are efficient now. So the payback, if you like, for a solar panel installation is now in the order of course, it depends on what you do. But realistically, you're looking at something like 6.5 years or thereabouts.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
good. But it's senseless putting up 5 or 6 PV panels. That's just not enough, because the infrastructure cost of the inverter and so on, and getting the company to come along and survey your roof and put the stuff up and so on. It really is a nonsense putting up 5 or 6 panels. You really need to be looking at a minimum of 10, and ideally more if you can fit them on your roof and so on.
Okay, that's a very good tip.
Yeah,
a lot of good tips, a lot of good insights there, Derry. If you could narrow it down to one tip then from a BER assessor, if you had to name one tip for homeowners out there, what would it be?
There's not one tip really. I mean, it's just to be aware of what you can do. Go along to someone like myself or other people that are in the business giving independent advice, and ask those people or me or whatever, listen, what should I be doing consistent with my budget? What should I be doing with my house? And, you start with the cheapest, the best bang for your buck, and you work down to what options are, realistic options are available. Yeah,
that's true, because each person is different.
Correct.
So it's whatever applies to yourself.
Correct.
But there's lots of great resources on SEAI.
SEAI is a very good website. Lots of detail on, if you want an assessor, go onto the National Register for BER assessors, and you can click on that, and it'll tell you all the assessors available in different counties right throughout the country. The site will also tell you all of the grants that are available from SEAI and explain the background to them and so on. One word of advice: before you do any upgrades to your house, you must get approval from SEAI beforehand. If you get new windows, if you get your attic done, or if you get cavity wall, or if you get a heat pump in or something, and then you say, okay, can I get a grant for this afterwards? You will not get it. You must get approval from SEAI before you start the work. And then only a registered contractor with SEAI can sign off on the work that they've done, and someone like me then would equally sign off on the work that's been done, for example, for solar panels or heat pumps or attic insulation or whatever.
Yeah, that's super important for people considering buying a fixer-upper house.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting, as you said, you can't do the works yourself.
No, you cannot. If you want a grant, you cannot.
Yeah, so there's no doing one thing and then trying to put it through for the grant. You have to make sure everything's done by licensed contractor. Yeah. That's a super important piece.
Yeah, it is.
I think that would be the best.
And a lot of people trip. I find quite a few people, make that, unfortunately, and make that mistake.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice.
You can go online, apply for your grant and what you want to do, and you get instant approval from SEI, and then about a week later you get the documents in the post, and then go off and organise your contractors and so on.
That's a great piece of advice. So we will leave a link to SEAI in this post, and I want to say a big thanks for Derry O'Sullivan for joining us today on Waterford Property Watch. Thank you for watching.
You're welcome, Darragh.